I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about one of the oldest decentralized technologies that it's been around for about 2,000 years, and that's democracy. And democracy right now is under threat. Freedom and democracy are very interlinked. In order to preserve our freedom, we need to be able to turn to technologies like blockchain and Bitcoin to help democracy. So if you look at some of the largest problems in our world today, each one of these red people represents 10 million people. So that means, according to statistics from the UN, there are about 60 million people that are refugees, 172 million people that are affected by war and conflict, 218 million people that have been subject to natural disasters, 783 million that have no clean drinking water, and 863 million that still live under extreme poverty. But one of the things that combines all these people together is they all live under dictatorship. The biggest problem we have right now is that affects many more than all these other problems is actually more than all of them combined is a massive global industry that exists to defeat even though there's a massive global industry that exists to defeat terrorism and poverty and help with clean water, there's no real global effort to defeat dictatorship. Today, 53% of the population live under a dictatorship. If you look at this map, all the areas in red either live under total dictatorship or under some type of authoritarian regime. So what does that really mean? Virtually all of the major issues in today's world, one of the major issues that triggers poverty, corruption, starvation, and the breakdown of the rule of law are dictatorships. Dictatorships really are part of the problem. When countries go to war, it's hardly ever two democracies. It's always really a dictatorship and a democracy, or two dictatorships. And the people that are subject to this are a huge social cost. If you look at this next slide, does anybody have any idea what this island is here? It's really kind of deceptive because it's not really an island. It's an image of the Korean peninsula. So if you imagine that the dark area is North Korea, and if you imagine the 25 million people there that have been subject to really the most atrocious dictatorship in the world, right across the border, the very same people have built amazing companies like LG, Samsung, Hyundai, and they have their potential of the people in North Korea has been wasted because of dictatorship. So what does this actually mean? Why am I here? Why am I talking about this? My day job, I run a venture capital fund. I invest in technology companies. I've invested in about 100 companies over 20 years. And I went to a talk much like this where I saw a North Korean defector talk about her harrowing escape, and it really made me want to get involved in some way. And so I reached out to the Human Rights Foundation, and I helped organize a program with them to basically get information back into North Korea. I'll tell you a little bit more about the Human Rights Foundation, but here's a video that I'll play that gives a little bit of background. How do I start this? Just press on play here. There's no audio? Okay. Well, it's a really cool video about what the Human Rights Foundation does. I'll start it over. This is something they produced that I'm just going to show you guys today. Here, hold on.
That's 3.7 billion people who are ruled by dictators, absolute monarchs, military regimes, and competitive authoritarian states. The United Nations, founded on the idea of peace among free nations, is a playground for dictators. Despotism is at the root of poverty, corruption, religious extremism, and war. And whether it's students in Saudi Arabia, journalists in Russia, or bloggers in Cuba, the road to freedom is filled with harrowing roadblocks. So now, the burden falls to civil society. We're the Human Rights Foundation. Our mission is to promote individual rights in closed societies, to protect democracy, and to disrupt dictatorship. We're on the front lines, exposing crime and corruption, popularizing the human rights struggle, spotlighting those who can challenge tyranny.
We work to free all prisoners of conscience.
Voices like Ali's are the sorts of voices of nonviolence that are absolutely crucial.
And exposing those who help dictators. Using every major world news outlet, we drive mainstream media, popularizing the struggle for human rights through advocacy and achieving major victories. HRF has a staff of 18 people covering the globe, intent on making an impact in the struggle for human rights. We've pioneered the Oslo Freedom Forum, known as the Davos for revolutionaries. It's the place where business leaders, technologists, and activists meet to figure out how to make our world a freer place. Working with local partners, HRF has implemented vital programs within dictatorships to raise awareness and education. Join the fight. Take a stand against oppression and be a catalyst of freedom. Protect and promote human rights around the world. Human Rights Foundation.
So a little bit background, obviously it's much better produced than I am, then I could talk about this. But
Today,
So one of the things that I got involved in as a technologist, I came to them and I said, let's do something about North Korea. And we came up with this program called Flash Drives for Freedom. And this program basically goes around collecting flash drives from people across the world. We've collected over 60,000. I think this data is old. It's probably right 80,000 now, which we then put South Korean soap operas on. We have a special version of Wikipedia that fits on it. And these are given to people that, through the gray market, distribute all these flash drives in North Korea. And you say to yourself, well, what display technology, how do they display this? Well, actually, there's a whole burgeoning black market in North Korea of MP4 players, much like your old iPod, that let people play video. And even though it's highly illegal, there's a huge demand for information. So what really drew me to the Human Rights Foundation is this kind of confluence between technology and how technology can really help human rights. And I'll get into this a little bit more, but there's a strong link between human rights and blockchain technology, especially Bitcoin right now. So just for you guys all to know what kind of other stuff the Human Rights Foundation does. We put on multiple Oslo Freedom Forums every year, and this is basically a Davos for dissidents. We bring together dissidents, technologists, human rights advocates, press, and we put on symposiums like this where people come and talk about these issues. The next one is on September 17th in New York City. Then there's one in Taipei. And typically at each one of these also Freedom Forums, there's a technology track, because technology is really key to making sure that dissidents have tools in order to fight dictatorship. Here's a photo of a lot of the dictators, the most awful dictators in the world, ranging from Kim to different dictators and most of these dictators have spoken at places like Davos or are accepted in society. There's very little almost stigma to being dictators because it's really hard to fight the cash and the power that these dictators have. So what does this have to do really with blockchain and Bitcoin? I mean, I'm sure many of you have seen this graph. It's a graph of hyperinflation before World War II. Germany basically devalued their currency so much so that it was a large leading factor in starting World War II because the economy of Europe was so disrupted. I don't know who has seen this bill before. So in 1980, one Zimbabwe dollar was equal to one US dollar. Clearly, things didn't go well for their currency if they had to print a $100 trillion note. So in Zimbabwe today, you could be a trillionaire. What does this actually mean? It means that, here's also Venezuela. You can see Venezuela is tracking to look a lot like the Germany before World War II. I was talking to a friend of mine who's from Venezuela, and she was an executive for 7 years in Venezuela. And over this 7 years, if you add up all of her salary today, it would be worth 60 cents. So the dictatorships are using this as a tool to take away from people. They can steal and rob people by guns, but they can also do it through hyperinflation. So what we need to solve this problem in a lot of countries, and a lot of people right now are using this, people in Venezuela, people in Zimbabwe, are using Bitcoin and other types of digital currencies to help save their personal property and their assets. What we really need is a sound and honest store of value, a decentralized and durable, censorship-resistant, permissionless native digital currency. And so far, the winner has been Bitcoin for all these people. I heard a story of a female software engineer in Afghanistan. She wasn't allowed to. Her father and her husband prevented her from opening a bank account, and she was paid in Bitcoin on a USB stick. And when she had to flee Afghanistan, she actually brought that USB stick with her, and that enabled her to start a new life when she got to the West after having to flee Afghanistan for being programming and being successful as a woman. So. Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, I think a lot of people talk about why was it created, but if you read the Genesis block, there's a quote in it that says, Times 03 January 2009, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. Bitcoin as its core, I think, was designed to help combat hyperinflation. And today, dictators are using hyperinflation to take control and take away the power of people. For the first time, individuals can actually own a currency. It's not just the domain of governments. It's a decentralized system that individuals can protect their property. So what about beyond Bitcoin? So I'm going to pick a little bit on China, not because China by any means is the worst dictatorship, but mostly because they are the best at building tools to prevent dissidents. If you go to China right now, there is actually a credit system, a credit score system, and so far this hasn't been used really to fight dissidents. But if you can imagine, if your credit score is too low, you can't travel on a train or a plane, and you can't basically do the things that function in a normal society. And at this point, there are 16 million people that have fallen below the credit score limit to allow them to travel. China is also really locked down all of its currency use through WeChat. WeChat, I don't know if you've heard, but WeChat basically is the preferred payment method, which is completely trackable by the government. It even, you can just scan and pay people through WeChat. I mean, it's gotten to the point where there's a New York Times article about this beggar on the streets who accepts only WeChat, no cash anymore. So in a cashless society, the potential for government, for dictatorship to take control of the lives of people is enormous. And China has developed these really impressive, from a dark side perspective, technologies that would potentially prevent freedom. And if you think of dissent as speech, and speech is really connected to being able to pay for speech, and money and speech are very connected. China can easily prevent people from dissenting with the government. And China, as one of the largest economies in the world and one of the exporters of these technologies, potentially can enable smaller countries to adopt these same technologies in order to prevent dissent. So I'm just going to skip here. So what does that mean for us? Panopticon was basically an idea for a prison in England where you didn't need to watch every single person in the prison at once. The security guards in the prison could shine a light on any room in the prison, and that was a way of maintaining social control. Technology can have a very dark side, and what I'm here to appeal to you guys is to build technologies to help dissidents and democracy throughout the world, because the earliest form of decentralization, the earliest technologies, decentralization, democracy, can be under threat for technology. And technology, we want you to build tools that are decentralized, that enable free flow of information, and we want you to come to our conferences to meet the dissidents and help build tools for them. So thank you so much for having me today, and if you have any questions, I guess I have about 5 minutes. Yes?
From Zimbabwe, how is Bitcoin any different from them just using the dollar or euro instead of their currency?
Well, Bitcoin is all digital, so you can have it on your you can have it on a phone. You can store the value in a format that can't be taken away from you. I know that in Venezuela right now, 8% of Bitcoins that are being transferred into fiat are being transferred in Venezuelan bolivar. So if you imagine, if my friend had been able to transfer some of her money in her salary into Bitcoin, she could have held onto it in a USB, and she would have been able to protect it versus and use it and still have it today versus not having it in the bolivar. Great, thank you so much.